others that won't hear. You look so tired.
Good evening, folks. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The Thursday, December 12th, 2013 regular scheduled school board meeting. If you would all please stand. The Inca High School Junior ROTC program will be presenting the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. East. All over. Arch.
If you'll remain standing for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Swanger.
Good evening, Chairman Reinhardt, Superintendent Baldwin, members of the board. I had hoped to introduce our art specialist, Robert Waller, to you this evening, but he is ill and not here this afternoon. So I would like to take the pleasure of introducing our holiday music for you tonight, performed by T.C. Robertson Chamber Choir under the direction of Miss Elisa Baker. This is an auditioned group of students that primarily sing a cappella music. These students compete in many events across North Carolina, and they perform at a lot of local events as well. So please help me welcome the T.C. Robertson Chamber Choir for holiday music this evening.
doors are moving by
Seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. Oh, they come praising the sound, Lord, giving their telling their tale, gaining the ring, while people sing songs of good cheer. Christmas is here, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ring, dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. One seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. Oh, they come praising the sound, Lord, giving their telling their tale, gaining the ring, while people sing songs of good cheer. Christmas is here, ding dong, 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 ding dong. They send on without end their joyful tones to every home. Dashing through the snow, when all at once up this way, for the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobs are ringing, making sailors proud. Oh, what fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song today. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells. Now the ground is white, grow it while you're young. Take the grass tonight and sing your sleighing song. Just get up on the day till 25 is free. Jingle bells, open sleigh and crack, you'll take the lead. Oh, jingle bells, Jingle bells, jingle, 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 jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Curlette, curlop, curlop, curlip, curlep, 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 curlop, curlop. Bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. What fun it is to ride and sing. Sleigh song tonight. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun for two to horse around an open sleigh. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride a horse in an open way. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, 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 jingle. What fun it is to ride a one-horse bells.
Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Chairman, I usually think something like that is followed by thank you and good night. Wow. It's the reason this is the best meeting of the year. We now will do the selection of chairman and vice chairman of the Board of Education for the coming year. And it has been the practice of this board to open the floor to nominations for each position, to take nominations and then vote on them in the order in which they're received until we have a majority. And then at that point, we'll have a chair and a vice chair for the 2014 year. So first, I will open the floor to nominations for the position of chairman.
Mr. Campbell, I would nominate Mr. Bob Reinhardt as chairman.
Okay, Mr. Bob Reinhardt is nominated. Are there other nominations for the position of chairman? Hearing none, is there a motion to close nominations by acclamation?
So moved.
Hearing no objection, we'll now vote. All in favor of Bob Reinhardt as chairman of the Board of Education, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Congratulations, Mr. Reinhardt, chairman of the Board of Education for the coming year.
So there is no time for questions, there is no vetting of the candidate?
No, ma'am.
There's no discussion?
No, traditionally, the board has just voted, and I think the feeling is you know your fellow board members well enough, and there's just a vote. Vice chairman, we'll open the floor to nominations.
Mr. Chair, I nominate Chip Craig.
Mr. Chip Craig has been nominated. Are there other nominations? Hearing none, is there a motion to close nominations by acclamation?
So moved.
Okay. Hearing no objection, all in favor of Chip Craig as vice chair of the board, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Congratulations, Mr. Chair. Mr. Craig, vice chair of the board.
Mr. Chip's fine. It is.
All right, I'd like to remind everyone that if you would like to make public comment, you'll have an opportunity to do so in just a few minutes. If you would please come over to your right where Mr. Rhodes is standing. There's a sign up for public comment. If you would please sign up so we have a record of your attendance. So next, we're going to move on to the approval of the agenda, and I guess I should say we met at 3 o'clock today where we had a work session where we went over policies, which is something we've been going over, I think, for the past year, and I think it will continue into next year, just about the entire year. At 5:30 we met in closed session, and now we're here at the open session. So, a couple of changes to the agenda. I would like to move from the consent agenda the November 7th open session minutes, the intent to purchase smart boards, B&Q projectors, and Ladybug document cameras, policies number 2122, 2124, 2220, and 3225 to the action agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the changes?
Mr. Chair, I move acceptance of the agenda with the changes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, we have the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. One of our three primary initiatives from a local standpoint is expanding our global educational opportunities throughout our schools. And Worldview is one of those key organizations in the state of North Carolina that has been just a tremendous resource to expand global awareness and provide educational opportunities for our students and especially our staff and our teachers. So next fall, just want to announce that we will actually be hosting, we will be the host site, the host district for the state for the annual Worldview Global Education Symposium. So we are very proud. I think you recall at our last board meeting we talked about our Safe Schools Symposium. We had a large turnout, over 250 participants. And so we anticipate that we will even have a larger attendance for the Worldview event. So a lot of work ahead, but we're very proud to be hosting that. There's a second local emphasis that we have placed here in Buncombe County Schools on technology enhancement for digital learning, again, out in our schools. And this week, you may or may not know, it is being recognized internationally as Computer Science Education Week. We have a number of our schools that are participating in activities that are associated with this recognition. And if you go to our system website, you're going to read about Owen Middle School and their participation in a program called the Hour of Code. And what they have done is invited IT experts from Western North Carolina to come in and actually teach our students at Owen Middle some very basics when it comes to computer code and programming. So we're very proud of that. As I have referenced to this board before, the Excellence in Public Schools Act, that is a new law that was passed by our General Assembly this past spring. And part of that particular act requires superintendents across the state to identify 25% of certified staff that fall under the definition of teacher. Now, for many of us, when you think classroom teacher, you have that vision of that math teacher or English teacher in the classroom. But the reality of defining teacher, according to the state, it actually consists of 9 individual categories, which would include a media coordinator, a counselor, a school psychologist. So that definition expands as far as a teacher goes that will fall under these 9 categories. So with that said, we must identify 25% of this particular pool, and we're going to look at the opportunity for their selection to receive pay based on performance recognition. And this pay will consist of incremental $500 pay increases over 4 years beginning next year, 2014-15. This identification process has begun, and it will involve a lot of teacher input. And we will use this input throughout to determine who will be offered this supplemental pay option. We will actually launch a web page of information that will be launched before the holiday break. Jason Robes and our communications staff's already working on that. That will be accessible for all of our teachers to give them some current information regarding this particular aspect of the law. An actual number representing the 25% will be determined from that total pool of teachers that have served for a minimum of 3 consecutive years as a full-time teacher within the Buncombe County school system. So that is the first criteria that must be met in order to qualify. We are finalizing a selection process with an advisory team of district-level teachers of the year. You recall that each year, each of our 6 districts identify a finalist for the Teacher of the Year, and then from those 6 finalists, we select a system-wide Teacher of the Year. So they will be involved as an advisory group. We know that at least one level of the criteria must be based on performance. So this advisory group is looking at that process very carefully. We also have plans to include the use of a survey that will be sent out to all teachers across Buncombe County. We will be updating you in March as far as where the process is, and we plan to have a recommendation, a list of recommended teachers to you in April. I might also add, Mrs. Lopez and the Personnel Department have already begun quite a bit of work in terms of giving us data, and a team of us that will be led by teachers from each district will actually be going out in January and meeting face-to-face. Again, just to make sure that we have done the best job that we can do to educate our teachers as far as what this particular aspect of the law will require. We are now in a primary renovation stage for our STEM high school. In fact, as you walk out of our doorway into the hall, if you turn left, you'll go about 10 steps, and then more than likely you're going to need to have a hard hat in order to go any further. We're very excited about this aspect of the renovation. As you may recall, the Minotaurium was placed on a fast-forward track, and we are now targeting its opening for February 1st, and we're going to be hosting a countywide robotics competition. Is that right, Ms. Cheek? We're excited about that. We also plan to provide the board with a tour of this facility in early to mid-January as the campus begins to take on more structure. We recently received some very good news regarding our Title III district performance, and that Title III focuses on our limited English proficiency students in Buncombe County schools. We met all of our annual measurable achievement objectives. All of these analogies, wow. For the past 4 years, we have been in LEA improvement, so these results mark significant progress toward exiting this status. So congratulations to Dr. Owenby and our LEP support staff and students, especially at the high school level. Finally, I want to thank all of our school communities, both on and off our campuses. We had a record toy collection. In fact, Ms. Swanger told me recently, I think our students in our schools actually collected over 1,100 items for the Evelyn St. Nick toy drop-off. A lot of wonderful fundraising opportunities and are underway. I understand that the Santa Pal collection, I know Mr. Pless is a primary facilitator of that opportunity to assist our kids and help our communities. And again, just a big thank you. We're very proud of our students in our schools for taking a part of that community service. So that closes out my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Baldwin. Folks, I made a mistake on the approval of the agenda. I would like to ask a motion to amend the agenda to remove the Common Core Standard Resolution from the action agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Can we explain?
I will. Just, I'll explain it
Okay, thank you.
after we vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The reason that we decided to, in our work session today, we decided to remove this from the agenda. We're going to have a work session sometime after the first of the year where we're going to discuss this a little bit more in depth. And so that's the reason that we're removing it from the agenda. So I apologize for forgetting to add that to the changes. So we're going to move on to good news. Ms. Rhodes.
Good evening, everybody. We are about to fill the room up with recognitions tonight. If you don't know, we have a state championship soccer team. They're nationally ranked even at the end of the season. So we created a little green room here next door. You might have heard a little commotion. We've got 2 sets of cheerleaders and an all-state cross-country runner. And so we will first start with Amy Roney, who will tell us about the plethora of state champions from T.C. Robertson High School.
Good evening, Dr. Baldwin, Chairman Reinhardt, members of the board. I'm proud to be here tonight, not only to recognize our chamber singers that provided the entertainment for you, but also our state champion soccer team and cheerleading team. And what I would like to say about these students is how proud I am of the leadership that they provide every day for Buncombe County Schools and in our school building. Never once do we have an ounce of trouble out of any of these students. They are certainly our leaders. They treat each other with respect. They function as a team, but they do that in our school building, and that's what we are most proud of. So I think at this time, our head coach, Miss Bree Hodge, for our cheerleaders, you all come on in. These ladies participate, let's see if I can get this right. They participated in the small varsity tumbling division. Is that correct? And I believe this is, we had one, Cece had surgery today on her arm, so she is here tonight. That's dedication right there. So we're glad you're okay and that you're here. But I'll let Miss Bree talk to you just a minute about what all that entailed.
Hi, good evening. My name's Bree Hodge. I have the opportunity to be the varsity cheerleading coach at Robertson for the past 4 years. We just started competing about 3 years ago, and in that time we have worked really hard and been able to bring home 2 state championship titles in that time. These group of girls were missing 6 of them, 6 or 7 of them. There were 12 altogether that competed in Raleigh. But this group of girls works incredibly hard, is always asking me to have extra practices when they feel like they need some more time. If I try to cancel something, they get upset. So that shows, how much they really love their sport and love what they do. We, the past few years, have gone to the State High School Athletic Association competition and have come in second place, and it was driving us crazy. So this one is a little bit sweeter, this championship is, since we were able to finally bring it home, the official state championship. So we're incredibly proud of them. The team is made up of Cecilia Banks, who is the one that had surgery this morning. She's might be a little loopy. No, I'm kidding. Brianna Church, Cameron Comerford, Adrienne Eddington, Ariel Eddington, Lauren Elliott, Sabrina Udy, Montana Johnson, Ashley Cooter, Kippen Mills, Bailey Whitson, and Shayna Wynn. I think that the most exciting thing, well, not exciting, we only have one senior this year, which is sad that we're losing her, but it's also exciting that we only have one senior because then we can continue to work hard and bring these types of accomplishments back to Buncombe County again in the future. So, thank you.
Board, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but Miss Jackson's granddaughter is one of the cheerleaders.
And I'm so
Kippen.
proud of all of them.
Raise your hand, Kippen.
And I believe I see Coach Wilcher and our soccer team. Come on in, Coach Wilcher. He probably will not tell you this. I think, according to several polls, they ended up ranked 4th in the nation. Is that right, Coach Wilcher?
Hey.
After their season. This is not our entire cheerleading and soccer team, as you can probably tell. We have a band concert going on tonight. We have senior project practices going on tonight. So a lot of our students are involved in other sports. So we're glad most of you could be here. You have 25? 25 on your team. So.
Dr. Baldwin, Chairman Reinhardt, and members of the board, just would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to honor our boys at this event. You know, state championships are something that teams strive for every year. This is my 19th year at Robertson, and every year we go and try and win that state championship. I couldn't do that without the support of a great athletic director in Laura Beatty and the administration of Amy Roney and our other principals at TC Robertson. Would not, as we said, we have 25 players. Several of the boys are working on their senior projects, so we had 13 seniors on the team. And as Ms. Roney said, we have gotten some national recognition, but these kids work hard all season long, and it was quite a privilege to be their coach this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Well done.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now I'm going to ask Jack Evans, principal of North Buncombe High School, who introduced the athletes from there that we're honoring tonight.
Dr. Baldwin, Chairman Reinhardt, members of the board, members of the audience, have two groups to recognize here. My first group is a group of one. Travis Leppy. Where's Travis? Oh, he is at senior projects tonight, okay? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about Travis since he didn't make it. He finished all conference, first of all, in cross country. But he was also runner of the year in the conference, which means he was the fastest young man in the MAC conference. So we went on to the regionals, won the regionals, went on to state and finished in the top 10. So he made the all-state team and cross country. And if of all of our sports, every sport has a different mentality, but cross country has a very different mentality. If all you're going to do is get out there and run the roads and run the trails, it takes some real mental strength to do that. So Travis is not with us here tonight, but he deserves this, and he did a great job this season. So please give him a round of applause. we are having senior or graduation projects tonight. So 2 of our senior cheerleaders that we're going to recognize tonight, actually, we changed their times to be at 6 o'clock, so they're actually with us. So I'd like for our senior cheerleading squad to come in. Across the front. I'd like for Tracy Wild, which is our assistant coach on varsity, and also our JV coach, to come up and stand with them. These young ladies, we just had the seniors come to you today, and raise your hand if you did your graduation projects. Are you glad? Are you glad it's over? Yeah, I thought so. This is a unique group of ladies. This is their 7th state championship at North Buncombe High School. Okay? There are 2 state championships in cheerleading recognized. One is the Cheerleading Coaches Association, and one is sponsored by the High School Athletic Association. North Buncombe won 7 of those total. Of these 5 ladies here, 3 of them have won 3 of the High School Athletic Association out of 4 years. That is not a bad accomplishment there at all. They were in the varsity, and I got to get this right too, varsity medium non-tumbling group. There's a lot of groups up there, and out of how many teams were in your group? 18. So they beat 18 teams, and it's very impressive. All of our athletes practice very hard and long and hard nights. There's a lot of evenings that I even leave the building, and they're still in their practice, and they're still rolling up those massive rolls that they roll up to practice on. They do incredible work. The 3 that's recognized and won 3, raise your hand. Laura Rubish, Morgan Silver, and Jocelyn Wild. 3 state championships in 4 years is pretty impressive. I would like, rather than the coach to get up here, I always like to hear a student. So Laura, you won the short straw. So come up and tell them a little bit about your experience.
Hi. All right. Well, I've already done my senior project tonight, so public speaking part 2. So I was put on the team as a freshman, and I can honestly say that being a varsity cheerleader has been one of the most incredible experiences that I've been able to have. And being able to be a part of 3 state titles has just made it even better. And I've just learned so much, and it's been so wonderful to work with so many different groups of girls and to bring back the honor and pride to our school and really just show people what a wonderful, talented group of girls we have. And being captain this year, it was also really wonderful to be a part of driving the team and really pushing them. And I'm so very proud of them for really bringing it this year. And I can honestly say I think that this past year we've had the best team we've had in a very long time. And it was really wonderful to see that, especially my senior year.
Last spring, we actually had 3 of these young ladies, Lauren, Morgan, and Jocelyn, go to the Nationals. And they actually won individual national championships last year as well in the spring. So very proud of these young ladies. Well done.
Thank you, ladies.
And finally, we'd like to have our employee recognition. And we'd like to recognize a teacher, Amy Raymond, who teaches first grade at Avery's Creek Elementary. And she's celebrating 10 years with us. And I like to talk to these teachers before, and I ask a few general questions. And one of her favorite things is seeing the light bulbs go off. And as a former teacher, I know what a great feeling that is when you see that eyes just open and they get that one little piece of information. She also has wanted to teach since she was young. In fact, all of her stuffed animals graduated with honors, and I'm sure she's very proud of that. So Amy, if you'll come on up here and accept this certificate.
All right, next we have public comment. I believe we have some folks signed up. Remember that you have 3 minutes, and I am the official timer.
First is Paula Dana.
Good evening. I'm Paula Dinga, and I am a 17-year teacher, 10 years in the Buncombe County school system. I'd like to thank all of you, each individually and collectively, for all that you do for teachers and staff and administration at Buncombe County Schools. Recently, the New Hanover County School Board passed a resolution opposing the state legislature's plan to offer 4-year contracts to the top 25% of state teachers. I realize that it's still unclear as to the criteria for how Buncombe County Schools will select this 25%, and that this criteria is likely to be varied throughout the state. However, I propose that our fellow teachers and school board in New Hanover have a better vision for how to treat this travesty of professional respect. No matter what the criteria, this contract is a direct assault on the most celebrated and effective practices of our profession, collaboration. Our county schools have made astounding advances in working together to have a positive impact on student learning. Teachers are collaborating on best practices and Common Core standards so that we can implement the most optimum learning environments. We are collecting and disaggregating data that expose any gaps and highlight effective instruction. Our schools have paid a great deal of money to send staff to seminars on professional learning communities so that we can break down the barriers to academic excellence. We are opening our doors, our file cabinets, our talents, and our vulnerabilities to tease out every ounce of improvement we can. And this is an extraordinary effort that requires commitment, dedication, perseverance, and humility. By devising a criteria, our Buncombe County Schools top 25%, you are telling teachers that we are competing against each other for a prize. The openness and generosity that embodies an environment of collaboration will be gravely threatened by this competition. And I would expect teachers to be less than forthcoming in sharing their own personal magic. Teachers will be less inclined to offer help to those who may be in direct contention for top 25 honors. And those who are just beginning or are struggling are going to do whatever they can to mask their imperfections from the very people who could help them improve. We have spent so much time, money, and energy breaking down the walls to better ways of teaching and learning. The unfortunate result of this legislation is that teachers will retreat, distrust, and suspect each other, and students will suffer, to be sure. Furthermore, this contract intimates an indignity that is beneath us all. The unfunded promise of a $5,000 increase over 4 years suggests that teachers should need the money more than the career protections of due process. It's almost Pavlovian, but I think that we should say that we have a deeper passion for what we do than to sell it out for a temporary sum. So while I know that a resolution such as the one that New Hanover County was so bold to adopt is at best a symbolic gesture, I submit that it's a powerful gesture. Buncombe County has thousands of stakeholders, teachers, parents, community members, and students who look to you for support and for guidance through these difficult times. We are passionate, we are hardworking, we are team players, and we are committed. And so I ask you to be bold and make a statement in favor of teaching and our students. Thank you very much.
Next we have Pam Dan.
Ma'am, how do you spell your last name?
D-A-N-Z, Delta Alpha November Zulu.
Thank you.
I'm here to speak about Common Core. I'm hoping that you will, in your future meetings, think about it very deeply. Because more and more information is coming from mathematical experts to refute the CCS in math. According to Dr. Christopher Tankin, writing in the Journal of Scholarship and Practice, the standards now exclude certain Algebra 2 and geometry content that is currently a prerequisite for almost every 4-year state college, essentially redefining college readiness to mean readiness for non-selective community college. They abandon the expectation that students take Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. This expectation is based on what high-performing countries expect of their students and has pushed about half of American students to take Algebra 1 by the 8th grade. The Common Core math standards also require that geometry be taught in an experimental method that has never been used successfully anywhere in the world. The Common Core math standards do not teach least common denominators. They delay until 6th grade the fluency in division, eliminate conversions between fractions, decimals, and percents, and adopt a new definition of algebra as functional algebra that de-emphasizes algebraic manipulation. The English language arts, ELA, are also poorly represented. The Common Core college readiness, ELA standards can best be described as skill sets, not fully developed standards. As such, they cannot point to readiness for a high school diploma or a 4-year college coursework. Skill sets in themselves do not provide an intellectual framework for a coherent and demanding English curriculum. The Common Core document expects English teachers to spend over 50% of their reading instructional time on informational texts, not bad in themselves, in a variety of subject areas, something English or reading teachers are not trained to teach. This requirement alone makes it impossible for English teachers to construct coherent literature curriculum in the grades 6 through 12. The ELA Common Core standards will actually impair the preparation of students for competing in a global economy. There is also a notable lack of English literature examples, thus short-circuiting the very cultural literacy that national standards ought to guarantee. The CSS, by their very existence, stifle educational innovation. They freeze what and how teachers may teach, right in place. There is not even any mechanism for grassroots correction of mistakes and inaccuracies found in the materials. But far worse, the CCS penalize original thinking. You must think as the standards demand, or you will not do well in school. China is trying to dig itself out of the results of its standardized educational system. Chinese children regurgitate their standards very well. They just don't innovate.
Ms. Stans, thank you very much.
Robert Soul.
Starting my watch. Hopefully you won't
Okay.
stop me.
And how do you spell your last name?
Soule, S-O-U-L-E.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to thank you so much. First of all, I moved to Buncombe County 10 years ago, and my oldest was a kindergarten. She's now at 10th grade, and I have 4 kids in Buncombe County schools. It's been a phenomenal experience, and I'm a tax-paying citizen of Buncombe County in the city of Asheville, and it's been wonderful. And I want to thank all the teachers that are here. I mean, we live in a great community with great schools. Thank y'all for everything you do. But I've got 2 daughters that are in high school, and I've got 2 kids that are in elementary school. And I can't lie to you. What my kids are learning, my elementary school age kids, it's not as good as what it was when my kids that were in high school and elementary. So I don't know what it is. I know it's Common Core. I know it's not the teachers that they currently have. It's not that they just have bad teachers. But there's been some kind of change, and all I can relate it to, because I'm not that involved, is that the curriculum has changed, and I believe it's the Common Core curriculum that's changed. So I see it. I'm involved. I'm there involved with their schoolwork at night. I'm one of these parents that's there every night, sit down with my kids and find out what they learned that day. And again, I'm thrilled. I'm glad I live here, and I appreciate everything that y'all have done. You've got a thankless job. And but I want to let you know that something has gone downhill in the last few years as far as I'm concerned, because I've noticed it. My 2 daughters that are freshmen and freshman, junior in high school, when they were in elementary school, they weren't learning what my 2 little kids that are in elementary school are learning today. They had regular textbooks, and they were learning the same stuff that I learned when I was their age. And what I'm seeing my little 2 learn today really scares me, because it's not as strong. I just don't think the curriculum is as strong. So thank you for everything you do. Teachers that are here and all of you administrators that are here, thank you. I love living where I live. I'm not really complaining, but what I'm saying is I'm seeing a downward trend, and I know y'all want what's best for the kids just like what I do. So just consider that as you go forward when you start talking about Common Core and other curriculum. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Soule.
Next, George Dan.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight a little bit about Common Core. In the wisdom of our founding fathers, the United States was set up so that each state could design its own education processes. This fosters innovation for which the USA is famous. The states can learn from each other and copy each other's successes and avoid their errors, and the entire nation going down and keep the entire nation from going down the tubes when a national blueprint fails. It is interesting to note that the schools that have rated the highest recently in the improvement of student achievement are charter schools, where there is competition and students flourish. Since parents pay for education, they should regulate education, not the educrats in D.C. or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Because protecting parental rights is so very basic to our freedoms and the way of life, starting with the Constitution, those rights were protected. The Constitution enumerates the powers that the federal government may exercise. Dictating national standards in education is not one of them. As recently as 2009, Congress has repeatedly stated in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that standards and assessments are the authority of states, not the federal government. Nothing in the title shall be construed to authorize an officer or employee of the federal government to mandate, direct, control a state, local educational agency, a school-specific instructional content, academic achievement standards or assessments, curriculum, or program instruction. The more recent American Recovery Reinvestment Act did not change this language one bit. This is the major reason people are upset about CCS. It's an illegal power grab by the federal government. It's amazing that the very persons who would throw their hands up in horror if the federal government messed with the minds of school children by mandating that they sing Silent Night in school are frequently the same people who feel it's perfectly okay to dictate when, what, and how children learn and what and how they should be assessed. This is messing with children's minds to the nth degree. If all teachers in North Carolina must teach to the test, that test determines the content of their lessons. CCS-aligned lesson plans are also available on the internet for anybody who wants to look it up. The CCS is a soft federal takeover of education. It has quietly snuck in on little cat feet, covered by a fog of promises to improve children's readiness for college and teachers' ability to teach. Each family is unique.
Mr. Dans, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Why don't we have Kathy Rodarmer?
Can I ask, Mr. Chairman, if several people have been reading comments or they have prepared comments, if we could get copies of those for the board
Yeah, they're always
before they
allowed to
leave.
leave those with us if they,
Okay.
if they choose to do so. Yeah. You can leave those with Mr. Rhodes.
Yes, my name is Kathy Rodarmer from Chandler. I don't like Common Core because it's a top-down curriculum type of standard that we have, and we need to have parents and local input at every level that this is instituted. In one recent poll that was done, 1,700 teachers from 71 different school districts had some interesting findings on that. Teachers reported serious reservations about Common Core standards, with 62% of polled teachers favoring delay or halt of Common Core implementation. The Department of Public Instruction has said that the size ignores the size of the federal footprint on Common Core. Let's remember a few facts. The standards were developed by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, with help from an organization called Achieve and generous funding from the Gates Foundation. But even former Governor Mike Huckabee, an original proponent of Common Core and a member of the governor's panel that worked on the original CC curriculum, stated on one of his recent programs that Common Core has morphed into something entirely different than what the original intent was when he was governor and worked on the project. The standard was developed behind closed doors by policymakers in Washington, D.C., not by states and grassroots organizations across the United States. Neither of the groups credited with authoring the standard had authority from the government to write the standards. Interestingly, the group credited with doing much of the heavy lifting Achieve Incorporated, a DC-based nonprofit, has been advocating for national standards for decades. Common Core supporters like to think that 45 to 50% of states choose to adopt the standards simply because they were better than existing standards in most states. It's not true. Almost everyone who participated in this debate agrees that states adopted Common Core standards to be eligible to compete for federal Race to the Top funding, not for better standards, really. Cash-starved states in the throes of a recession were ready to do anything to get additional funding for education, including acceptance of national education standards virtually sight unseen. In addition to linking Common Core standards to eligibility for Race to the Top funds, the Obama administration also linked waivers for penalties for failing to meet goals under No Child Left Behind to state adoption of Common Core standards. The Department of Public Instruction said North Carolina adopted CCS through the legislative mandate process. That's misleading. The State Board of Education, not the North Carolina General Assembly, adopted the standards a mere 1 day after they were released on June 2nd, 2010. A look back at the record shows that there was little discussion by the Board of Education. To this day, the General Assembly has not fully considered to discuss Common Core. It is true language was added to legislation directing the State Board to continue implement.
Thank you, Ms. Rodarmer.
Okay, thank you.
And likewise, if you'd like to leave your comments with Mr. Rhodes, he'd be glad to take those. Okay. Mr. Rhodes, is there anyone else? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to our reports about our 2 new intermediate schools. Board members, I would like to ask that we're going to have 4 different reports. If you will hold your questions until the end, I would appreciate it. Just write them down so you don't forget. And we're going to start with Mr. Fearley, I believe.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We've reached the project closeout phase of the intermediate school projects. There's no one happier than me about that. It doesn't mean that the contractor's responsibility is over yet. The construction phase has ended, in effect. In terms of the project status, we are seeking LEED certification. We've had back and forth with the U.S. Green Building Council, and we feel that we're very close to achieving LEED status. With that, not only do we get a recognition and such, but there is an actual financial benefit, and that is that we will receive from Public Service North Carolina, the gas company, what they call rate 127, and it's a reduced rate on purchase of natural gas that once we have that certificate and show them that we will receive for those both schools, which will cut our utility bills. All the work in the schools is code compliant. We received a certificate of occupancy before we actually occupied the school. The building officials have walked through again and certified the building to be code compliant. In the package of closeout documents, there's numerous documents. The 2 I'm going to talk about are the final change order and the final pay application. So we had a final change order that withheld $589,000 from the contract price of the contractors. That was intended to cover our costs related to the delay of the opening of those schools. The contractors also agreed to upgrade the HVAC systems. They are about to install, starting next week, an upgraded airflow monitoring system and damper system, a high-performance damper system. This will help us get better feedback and be able to adjust and tweak the buildings in a more efficient way. We have had some issues with, in very cold temperature, we've had the freeze protection activate on a couple of the units, and that involves us having to go out there and reset them. This upgraded, what we call the EBTRON system, sophisticated monitoring and reporting system, will really tell us what exactly is going on leading up to when these units trip on freeze protection. Fortunately, we have a very efficient building in terms of insulation. They really hold the heat, or in the summer, they hold the cooling very well because they have a very good building envelope. So when they do trip, many times no one even knows. Greg Fox in our maintenance department will get an alert, an automated alert, and send someone out there and reset it. So when the contractor completes that work, we hope to have better information and then be able to tweak it as necessary to avoid those intermittent shutdowns. The contractors also agreed to extended warranties on 2 items that we've had issues with. In our exterior canopies, we've had some leaks, and they have made some repairs, but they'll still be on the hook for those canopies to make sure that that we get those issues resolved. The lighting systems are very sophisticated in these schools, a big part of why they're very energy efficient, and we've had some components go out on a regular basis, so the contractors agreed to warranty and to replace those components or whatever else goes wrong for an extended period of time. In terms of the final pay application, you'll see in the documents that there'll be a list of all the work that was done and complete. They break it down in what they call a schedule of values. And so you can see all the breakdowns. What that really represents is work by the subcontractors. And we've had a lot of local subcontractors on the project. And the contractor, now that we've paid them, has no excuses not to pay the subcontractors. And that's an important thing. These are small local guys that have done good work and need to be paid. Contractor has no excuses anymore. We do have an aesthetic issue at Kuntz. We have excessive cracking in the concrete slab. We've had structural engineer out there who's looked at it. It is purely an aesthetic issue. And in our negotiations of closeout, we have agreed not to file a claim against that contractor for the cracking. Again, it is purely an aesthetic issue, and we've agreed to live with that. With that, I'm going to introduce our architect from Architectural Design Studio, Mike Cox, and he'll offer his perspective on the closeout. Mike?
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Baldwin. It was the winter of 2009 when you started these projects. It was not the best of times by any measure. If you recall your Egyptian history, it was the custom, or sometimes the custom of the pharaoh, to have both the architect and the contractor buried in the in the pyramid. As you might imagine, it has been a source of some concern to both of us that this board might be interested in reinstituting that custom. I have, on a less serious matter, I want to tell you a little bit about your schools. All of you know that there are mysteries built into these schools. We have, and I've been meaning to do this for some time, I have a nook for each of the first students that can tell me where the depiction of Pluto is located at their school. It's not an easy question. I'll let both the principals know tomorrow. I'll call Ms. Gibbs, Dr. Gibbs, Ms. Collins, and let them know that we're doing this. Whoever can get that email to me or picture of Pluto first will receive a nook. We didn't just bring gifts. If we go back, and I want to go from astronomy to mathematics. If we go back to November 10th, 2009, that's when your project was bid. Evelyn bid for $16,400,000 on that day. Kuntz bid for $15,200,000 on that day. With the authorization of the board, we negotiated that week, with the cooperation of the contractors, a reduced cost that you would never exceed. Those projects ended up costing, Evelyn cost $15,700,000 in the end. Kuntz cost $14,500,000 in the end. You will never see prices like that for school construction again. As a consequence of the construction environment that we're working in, it won't happen. I hope it never happens again. There was talk, and you all may remember this, in 2009 there was talk of postponing these buildings to sometime when the economy was better, when the need was greater, when people weren't suffering as much. As a consequence of your actions in 2009, there was a boost in the economy in our area. The contractors in our area were hired. Suppliers in our area found work. Construction workers in our area and construction workers were hit very hard by the recession, found work in your schools. In one instance, and most of you won't know this, a woman, recent veteran, was hired at Evelyn, worked for Shellco, the contractor there. She became, as a day laborer, she would go on to the end of the project and become the supervising person on the job. She was the person that I would contact anytime that I wanted something done at the school. She supervised the end of your project. She's gone on as, she's now a permanent employee of Buncombe County Schools. That was not the purpose of building these schools. In doing these schools, you reduced overcrowding at 7 individual schools. You improved the traffic conditions, and I know you won't believe this, but you improved traffic conditions at West Buncombe Intermediate Elementary School, at Valley Springs Middle School. We provided new, and Tim alluded to this, new energy efficient schools that are a standard for the state. You raised the bar for Buncombe County students, for students in Western North Carolina. And you did so at the benefit, or to the benefit, of the students here. If we go back to the numbers, and this will make sense of why I wanted to go back to 2009. We don't have to look very far to know what would have happened if you had postponed the construction of these buildings. I can tell you tonight that your building, your Evelyn, that cost you $15,700,000 would today cost you $21,200,000. Your Kuntz Intermediate School that cost you $14,500,000 would today cost you $20,600,000. That's a savings of $11.5 million because of at least 2 things. Because of the economy that we built these schools in, and because of your decision to build them. I don't want to forget the fact that these are difficult projects. Of the projects I've been involved with in my career, these were the most difficult construction projects I've ever been involved with. That, I think, and I'm going to say that is due in large part to the economic conditions under which these buildings were built. I think the contractor would tell you the same thing. It was not lost on me that my client had to do more work as a result of this. But I've got to tell you, I honestly believe that the reduction in cost is due in no small part to the actions of this board, the extra work that you did, the extra work of the superintendent, the extra work of Mr. Feely, the extra work of the Buncombe County School staff. There was great benefit achieved in what was done over the last 4 years. It gets better. Mr. Feely told you that we were trying to get a certificate from the Green Building Council, LEED certification. I can report to you tonight that not only will you get LEED certification from the Green Building Council, they have awarded you a silver certificate on both schools.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Most of you won't remember this, but I told you in 2008 that after decades of working with the school board, this would be a legacy project for me and my company. If we go back to my earlier remarks about the Pharaoh, that did not mean that I intended to be buried in these buildings. I'm very proud of what we achieved together. These are the legacies that we intended to leave Buncombe County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Board, if I can, let me review some of the closeout documents with you to make sure that you understand that the closeout was in accordance with the discussions that we had about closing out these projects. I think in looking at these documents too, it's important to remember that one of the reasons why the final closeout of the construction phase took as long as it did were issues related to the mechanical systems, and that is the contractor that went bankrupt on both of these general contractors. You may not know this, folks in the audience may not know this, but in modern construction, the general contractor does not swing a hammer. The general contractor has very few employees, has supervisory employees, and all of the work is done by subcontractors. And that's real important for a lot of reasons. But anytime a major subcontractor, such as the mechanical subcontractor, goes bankrupt, they have to go out. They have to then get a replacement contractor to come pick up where the bankrupt contractor let off. Not surprisingly, you don't get a good a deal with a replacement major subcontractor that you get on bid day when everyone is trying to obtain the work. So both of these contractors had to go out at significant expense. This board will remember that those discussions were going on in 2011 as to the replacement contractor they were going to get and what they were going to do. At the same time, there were controls issues that had to be worked out. So neither contractor walked off the job, neither contractor ignored the work. It just literally took this long to get all of the pieces in place for the final completion and the final payouts. But in doing so, I think it's also important to remember the buildings were supposed to be occupied for the beginning of the 11-12 school year, approximately August of 2011. They were occupied, they were taken over by Buncombe County Schools in December of 2011. And that fact, so there was about 4 to 5 month delay in us getting into the building. That will become important when I talk about liquidated damages. But let me point out a few things to you quickly. The first is in the application for the final payment. As your architect told you, that is a wonderful document. If you want to know why are we paying the contractor, it details, according to the type of work that was done, exactly what the payment was made and what it was for. Isolated footings, wall concrete, slab on grade work, expansion joint work, wood blocking. It goes trade by trade so that you can see where the money goes to with each application with the final pay application. The final pay application also shows you the amount that was deducted through change orders in order to close out the project. So for example, on the Eblin project, the withholding from the contractor to cover our costs as a Board of Education caused by the delay, $267,492.63. That is also included in a change order, in the specific change order that Mr. Fairley talked about in the packet. From there, we move to the typical closeout documents, and from your legal standpoint, from the standpoint of your legal liability protecting you, from the standpoint of our office as board attorneys, these are the documents we really care about. We want you to finish in the black, and you did. You were able to finish in the black without going into the red like the contractors did. But at the same time, you got the closeout, which means, first of all, you have consent of surety. Why does that matter? The surety stands good for the work of the contractor. So if you had a contractor who had some faulty construction that you didn't discover, or you didn't know what the reason or the responsibility was until several years later, if that contractor has gone out of business, you still have a surety to look to. And you have nationally recognized sureties that have several hundreds probably of millions of dollars in reserves for these claims that are backing both jobs. They have consented to the final payment. And in that consent of surety document, it says that they still stand good for their obligation to cover the work of the contractor. The worst thing you can do on a major construction project, and you only do it as a last resort, it wasn't necessary here, is kick a contractor off. Because if you do so, the surety is not obligated to agree with that. The surety is not obligated to then cover deficiencies, and the surety can fight you in court and simply refuse to pay, saying you didn't have justification for terminating the contractor. So we've got the warranties, we've got the extended warranties that Tim talked about, we've got consent of surety, so we have somebody to look to. From that, we have the next most important document, which is the final certificate and release. This document does two major things. First of all, it says that the work is completed in accordance with the plans and specifications. So if there is an issue that the board discovers, and I'll give you the most frequent example we deal with in school construction is roofs. Let me say on the record, let me be clear for the meeting, we know of no issues with the roofs on these buildings. This is by way of example, but most of the cases I've had in my career have been roof cases. Tony's over there nodding his head. That you would come in and then you would be able to hold the contractor's feet to the fire that the roof was supposed to be built according to plans and specs. If there's a defect, you could then do something about it. The contractor remains liable for any deviation from the plans and specifications. The other thing this document does is this releases the Board of Education. One of the things that your administration made very clear to the contractors, and with all due respect to Mr. Cox, he was used to this too, is the board wasn't releasing anybody of anything. We were going to close out the project, but we expected the projects to be done correctly and in accordance with plans and specs. And you have two very good buildings to be very proud of. But we have not released folks, except for a limited release I'll talk about in a minute, but the contractors release us from any possible liability. And as you can imagine, when you have a delayed opening of a school, it is not always clear who is responsible for all the delays. You have to remember the Board of Education has independent contracts. The architect has contracts with engineers and others. Then you've got the contractor, the subcontractor. When you get into construction litigation, everyone starts pointing the finger at everyone. So one of the benefits here is that we're released from any possible claims that anybody on behalf of the board did anything that could have delayed the project. So we get that release. That's part of our usual closeout documentation that we wanted to get from the contractor. Then on the Kuntz School, the only difference in the documents, and again, I'll point out that the Kuntz documents also show the amount that was withheld from that contractor. That's $323,965.44 that in the end the contractor agreed to be withheld from the final payment. The only difference is a limited release that was worked out between the parties there. That limited release was a few specific items that had come up and had been resolved and were no longer an issue. The major release that this board gave to both contractor and architect was any claims for delay and any claims that might have come forward in terms of the parties claiming that there was delay among the parties. The reason why we were able to give this release, and it includes the architect, is because the contractor cannot sue this board for delay. That's one of the things the contractor has released you from. So in turn, for us to then release the design team, their representatives from any delay claims is easily done because you've been released at that point. So it's not like that you're going out on a limb, and it makes it very clear that you're not releasing anyone from any of the performance issues with the plans and specifications that are covered with those. Let me address finally the liquidated damages question, one of my all-time favorites, and you'll have to forgive me for doing a little education or construction law 101 here. The liquidated damages is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of construction law. You start with the fact that liquidated damages are there because trying to decide how much an owner is damaged for each day a project is late can be very difficult to quantify. So the law allows you to set a numerical amount that will cover those damages that you suffer in case of delay. Like most things in the law, though, it is not black and white. It doesn't say that whatever number you set will be upheld by the court. Liquidated damages only cover delay until you have substantial completion. The statutes define substantial completion as being able to occupy the building and use it for its intended purposes. We all the time in construction contracts, to your benefit, push the envelope on that standard. And in these contracts, your architect had a standard in there that there had to be confirmation of several of the HVAC components before there could be substantial completion. So we took the position throughout that there would be a slightly later date of substantial completion than occupancy. There is no guarantee that a court or a judge would have upheld that. Again, liquidated damages are to cover that delay that you may have. The other principle that is black and white is liquidated damages cannot be a penalty. So if we agree with the contractor that the liquidated damages will be $10,000 a day for every day we can't get into the building, the courts are free to strike that down as a penalty and not uphold it. Because again, it's just supposed to cover your damages. No one is supposed to receive a windfall simply because a building is late. And that is a premise of contract law that relates to the liquidated damages. So again, why do you have liquidated damages? It's to cover your damages. What are your damages as a Board of Education? Fascinating question, because as a business owner, if I've planned to move into a new building and start my operations and I can't, I have some very real damages. I may have lost contracts. I may have to acquire alternative space. There may be real damages that relate at that point. The damages we suffer as a school system are not as clear. We were able to keep the children in their home schools. We did not have to move this. We couldn't, we could keep the students in their home schools. There was no alternative provisions that we had to provide for. We didn't have to rent space. We didn't lose any profits. We continued to educate like we all had. We were just delayed in getting the students to move in. So what were our damages? Our damages were the increased cost to the board of the delay in completing the projects, in getting additional architects, engineer fees, in storage costs, in some retests and some other things. So when it came time to close out these projects, what we looked at was the actual damages suffered by the board, again, so that you could finish the projects in the black, instead of looking at the liquidated damage number. So the $585,000, which you have held back on both projects, that is what enabled you to finish these projects within budget, to stay in the black, so to speak, as we've been saying. If you had pursued liquidated damages, first of all, I will make no guarantees, nor will I ever give percentages on anything like liquidated damages, because it is up to the courts, it's up to the specific facts, who caused delays, what they were related to, whether or not there's a penalty. But it's fascinating to me how this turned out. If you take the number of days that we were delayed in occupying the building, and then you give the contractors, there was an issue, you'll remember, with the monitors that let the light in on the top of the buildings. If you give them 18 days, which our architect had said that that was a reasonable amount of time in which they had to retool to adjust to that, if you give them the benefit of that 18 days, they were approximately 130 days late in us getting into the buildings, which again is the statutory standard. 130 times $2,000 a day is $260,000. So had you gone to court, had you tried to collect liquidated damages, I don't know that you would have come out any better than you are now as far as the liquidated damages provision. And again, that only covers through the substantial completion. Now, certainly we would have argued for more had we needed to go to court, and guess what? The contractor would have argued for a whole lot less. The contractor also, they were prepared to argue that the delays that they suffered were not of their own making, all of them, and that they suffered additional damages, they would have brought those forward as well. So again, the liquidated damages issue is one that people often bring up, but in this case, what you chose to pursue were your actual damages so you could finish the projects that were in the black at that time. So it worked out pretty good as far as the numbers and the relationship between the numbers at that point.
Dr. Baldwin?
I think I'm either bad cleanup or I'm supposed to close out the closeouts. Mike talked about when we began the construction of these two projects, and sitting here, he said it was the best of times. It sort of reminds me of the famous Dickens quote in the tale, I think it's The Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of times, it was the worst of times. And it was the best of times in terms of cost savings for us, because I think Mike's exactly right. Had we decided to delay and build these two projects, these two schools, anytime within the current time period, he estimated of savings of around $11 million. So we did take advantage of what I would call the Great Recession at that particular time. It was also the worst of times for the construction business, and having a son that's in the construction business, I can certainly relate personally to that, and hearing his stories from the companies he worked with during that time. I think I'm correct, Tim, that Malou Blamey, the contractor GC on the Kuntz site, I think they lost over that time period 10 subcontractors. And the construction terminology, I would say that those 10 subcontractors went belly up. Bottom line is they went out of business. So as Chris pointed out, it's time, and it's transition time. But it's money that cost the general contractors. Shellco, I'm not sure, but I do know that there were multiple subcontractors as well. In fact, they shared a number of those subcontractors on both sides. And I know they also suffered, again, a number of those subcontractors. Southern Mechanical, Chris mentioned, that was HVAC, which is huge. I know in my experiences as a principal on construction sites, losing them was significant. But again, it was cost to those GCs. The subcontractors, I think you're exactly right. Majority of them were local, and I know Mr. Fairley probably had some sleepless nights because his phone would ring off the hook over this period of time, because these are local partners, many of them parents with kids in our school system that weren't being paid. So very positive of these closeouts, they're going to have checks. Let me leave you with three thoughts. First and foremost, my charge as superintendent of this board undertaking these two projects is I make sure I bring them back to you completed in the black. We've done that. We stayed within budget. There were times I was over at Mr. Campbell's office and I was sweating bullets, but we brought them in under the line. Second, do not underestimate what Mr. Campbell said, which is the contractors, both contractors, and their bonding companies remain liable for work. That's absolutely critical. I can tell you as a principal of Reynolds High School, having gone through construction projects, a major construction project there, that was very important. And then finally, bottom line of it, the Irwin community, the Robertson community, and Buncombe County schools are left with two excellent school buildings. They are models for the state. And we didn't know it until tonight. Mike kept this from us. But both of those buildings receiving silver LEED certification is incredible, because we put that as a priority. We wanted those buildings, again, and symbolically for this generation of students and future generations that are going to occupy those buildings. So I would invite the public, if you've not had the opportunity to visit those campuses and those school buildings, please do so, because they truly are models of what makes Buncombe County schools so special in the state of North Carolina. That closes my closeout comments.
Okay. Board, at this time, if you have any comments or if you have questions of any of the four presenters, feel free to do so at this time. Mr. Bryant.
I have one quick question, and Mr. Campbell, I'm not sure who would answer it. The surety policy. How long is a surety policy? How long is that good for? What's the duration of time? And is the surety policy that we've gotten on both these schools standard for the industry in terms of whatever that time is?
Yes, the surety basically the question is, for those who didn't hear it, is how long is the surety's obligation? The surety's obligation by law is the same amount of time as the contractors. The law uses the phrase, they step into the shoes of the contractor to guarantee the job. What North Carolina law provides is that from substantial completion, and that's where the statute says you can occupy the building for your intended uses. So for us, that would be, we would need to use December, October, November, December, that time frame of 2011 is our substantial completion date. You cannot sue after 6 years in North Carolina on damages. You can sue for warranties, you can sue for guarantees beyond 6 years, but you cannot sue for damages beyond 6 years. That's just public policy. Years and years and years ago, the construction industry and others lobbied the General Assembly, and there's a 6-year statute of limitations. Within that, for non-public entities, there's even a floating 3 years from when you know you have a problem and you know who's liable for that problem. So one of the things that Mr. Fairley knows is that our office does not like to go beyond 3 years from when we knew about a potential issue with any construction. And then, of course, we're going to be looking at that 2017 date as the absolute outside and make sure that if there are any issues, they get addressed. So the short answer to the question is roughly December 2017 would be the outside time frame that we would always want to keep in mind.
Thank you.
I had a question. I just wanted to clarify, you said that we did not collect any liquidated damages. Is that correct?
Yes, again, what the liquidated damages, you would withhold those from the contract amount, is what the board would have done had the board chosen to keep liquidated damages. We never got down to assessing to the penny what we thought you should withhold or what we thought that amount should be, because the board chose to go with the actual damage calculation. And again, just to be clear, like the lead silver, I didn't know this today until I was looking at it. It was kind of uncanny to me that 130 days, which is a very likely outcome had we all had to go to trial, would have been $260,000. Well, we withheld $585 on both jobs, so, feel pretty good about that. But you did not withhold liquidated damages because you chose to withhold actual damages. That was through an agreement with the contractor. And the other issue, and in fact, Ms. Baldwin, I think you had asked about some subcontractors that, or at least one that had contacted you. If we withhold an amount of money for liquidated damages that goes beyond our actual damages, then we're penalizing not only the contractor, but we're also penalizing the subcontractors, because the contractor's not going to pay the subs until the contractor's been paid by us. So there's kind of a good faith public policy issue too anytime you're looking. Just because you can withhold more in liquidated damages than what you actually suffered, there's a real question of should you from a policy standpoint, because you're only hurting local subs in your area. And I think we had some discussion about that.
So the actual damages, is that actually, is there a list of what is included in that?
There is, yes, there is
I
a
asked
list, and
last month.
the majority of that is additional engineering fees related to working out the mechanical system, the lion's share of it. Then there were some storage fees. We had to store equipment, Ms. Baldwin, since we couldn't move in right away. And then I think, Mr. Fairley, we had to do an air test over again, and there were some other fees, and we do have those fees, which can be provided if you'd like them.
Yes,
Any
I would like
other
to.
questions?
I had a question about the commissioning agent. I think we paid maybe $350,000 for this company to make sure that the mechanical systems were working properly, and that's why there was the recommendation of adding the Ebtron and those sort of things. Has that commissioning agent signed off on the HVAC systems yet?
Yes, part of the several layers there. First of all, the commissioning agents' work with us is ongoing. The Ebtrons are actually going to be installed, and the hope is that they are in by Christmas Eve at both schools. That is ongoing as we speak. Had to be coordinated with the subcontractors and everyone else. The commissioning agent will actually come back after that's done with the test and balance agent to do some additional tweaking. Part of the lead certification is that the commissioning agent had, and I'm getting a little outside of my, my competence, but Mr. Fairley can jump up if I say this wrong. The commissioning agent had to certify that the system was within the plans and specs for us to be able to submit it to lead. So the commissioning agent did certify that it was in plans and specs. Things have passed code. North Carolina Building Code was met, submission was made to lead, and then as you've heard tonight, you got the lead silver. So yes, the commissioning agent was part of the sign-off on the HVAC system, making sure it met plans and specs and submitting it to lead, and the commissioning agent's not done until after we get the Ebtrons installed.
So
Going back to the lead certification, we were only really applying for the standard lead certification at the beginning of the project, correct? And so we kind of have a little bit of an upgrade there that we hadn't planned on.
It was always a goal. We were always trying for silver. We never thought we could. But put the facts before the Green Building Council, and they made the decision. They decided to award it.
Thank you. Ms. Baldwin, you had another question?
is there a plan B if this Ebtron system and the damper systems, if they don't work, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, and there needs to be something further done, who will be responsible for paying for that?
Back to the first point, that everyone still remains on the hook. So legally speaking, contractor, subcontractor, supplier, architect, design team are all responsible for the performance of particular components. The trick in any situation is, first of all, troubleshooting and trying to correct it in a way that you can successfully do that. And if not, then liability, that's where you would look, and that requires further evaluation experts. But all those parties remain potentially liable for any construction issue on any construction project.
And that
Yeah.
includes the daylight monitors and the roof, as far as leaks is that under a roof warranty or?
Yes, we have a roof warranty that takes, and Mike, tell me if I mistake this, we have roof warranties that take into account the penetrations in the building. Construction is always, and construction law is very complicated. The question, if you have a leak, becomes, is it due to the fault of the roofing contractor, or is it a defect in the monitors themselves that may have been subbed out to a metal fabricator or some other subcontractor? So there is always a review and an analysis of which trade may be responsible. So just because there's a roof leak doesn't necessarily mean it's the roofer, but that's always one of the first places you'd look.
Okay. I have another question for Mr. Fearley.
Okay.
In the past, I've inquired about radon testing in those two intermediate schools due to the classrooms on the basement level, and because this area is known for having radon gas, which is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. Those tests were supposed to be conducted over spring breaks or the summertime, and I didn't know if you've gotten any results from that.
The tests were never conducted because we have had this ongoing work on the mechanical system. And in order to do the radon testing, there needs to be an extended period of time when the building is totally 100% unoccupied. We haven't been able to find that window to be able to do that testing. But we have the protocol, we have the folks on board, and hopefully this summer we'll be able to do it because all the work will be done. We're in a shutdown period of time, so that's the goal.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to make a comment if I
Go right
may,
ahead.
And I'm speaking actually more as a mom, but I guess still as a representative in the Robertson District. I want to just thank Mr. Cox, Mr. Fairley, and Mr. Campbell for all the hard work that you've done to get us to this point. I was one of those very frustrated moms over the situation. My daughter was one of the students that was delayed in entering, and it was a very rough road. But as I was told, that students are much more resilient than their parents, and I have found that to be true. And she had a wonderful experience for her year and a half at Koontz, and did indeed enjoy the building. I'm going to have to ask her if she knows where the picture of Pluto is. However, she's moved on, so she will be disqualified. But again, I just wanted to let you know as a parent how much I appreciate all the extra work that you guys put into getting us where we are now. And I can truly say that I am very proud of Koontz Intermediate and Evelyn, although being that I haven't been out to actually visit Evelyn yet, probably have to do a board exchange program.
We can make that happen.
Yeah, I'll wear it. Yeah, you know, I wanted to just let you know that I haven't had the opportunity to let you know that publicly. So thank you very much.
Also, there are some other rebates that may possibly come back to us in the form of some state money and maybe some other areas. So there may be some additional monies that we get back on these projects down the road. And we'll try to let the public know if those happen also.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I also would like to thank the people that have worked so hard to make this happen. It has been interesting to watch as a plan was developed and sabotaged by rain or mudslides or whatever else you would like to list. But this was a picture of how a team should work and work for the goal of making a wonderful place for our students to go to school and have a safe and pleasant building to learn in. And I want to thank all of you.
And I did have two more questions for Mr. Fearley.
Okay.
As far as to collect rainwater, I know we had a lot of rain this past summer, and has that system been able to function properly?
Remember, we have two systems at each school. One collection system off of the gym feeds a 5,000-gallon rainwater collection cistern, and it has a very high-tech delivery system. You hook a hose to it, you open the valve, and the head pressure feeds the water out. And that basically is in the garden area. Mike Cox has labeled it the farm, so for the school garden and such. It's a very hands-on. You see the water pouring off of the roof. And then the other cistern is it's been called the silo. It's a very large collection. It's 55,000 gallons. And our fire departments have looked at that with, that they would really love to tap into that. But what that does, those cisterns do a couple of things, and they provided us lead points. Not only do they provide irrigation capabilities, but what they do are big buffers for stormwater. So when the rain comes off the roof, instead of rushing right to the stormwater system that everyone else is doing and perhaps overtaxing it, these are big buffers. So we have to remember that that's another purpose of it. The big cisterns tie into an irrigation underground piping that goes to the playing fields. And our hope is that someday a benevolent user of those playing fields will be able to tap into that and put a real irrigation system. Right now, those systems do a similar thing. They at Eblin, they feed the two fields, and if you put basically above ground, like we would use at our home, you can irrigate those fields. But until a below ground automatic system goes in, they'll only be used for if we hit a drought or something like that. At Kuntz, however, we have irrigation systems on the baseball field and the soccer field at Estes, and that is a real legitimate irrigation system. And what the cisterns do at Kuntz is feed that system so that we can utilize that water until it runs out, and then we use city water after that. So that's how they're operating.
And, sorry.
So they're really pretty low tech. It's mainly gravity fed.
They really are, yeah.
Oh, the carpet. I don't know if it was just for aesthetic reasons because of the cracking at Kuntz that we did put carpet down, I believe you had told us.
No, we haven't put carpet down.
Okay.
That's something that we
we
considered that with some of the extra monies that we have left over, that's something that we may look at doing once we find out exactly what all these rebates are and how much we have. That may be something we look at the schools and see if that's something they want to do. So, yeah, but no, they haven't been done yet.
Yeah, and just to get a perspective on the timeline for the Inca Intermediate School, has there been any activity towards building that school?
No, all we've done is
there a date?
stabilize the sites per the agreement with the seller. We had an engineer look at it and worked with them, and they have stabilized the site by planting grass, changing grades, putting in riprap and stone and such. So we just didn't want to be in a liability situation where we had erosion. So that's all we've done, and there's been no further action.
Was that paid for by the school system or the
seller?
The seller. Okay. Great.
And that may be something that we look at after the first of the year. So, thank you, folks. We appreciate the reports. And so,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We have a break.
Yeah, we'll take a quick 20 after. Let's get started back at 20 after.
20 after.